tuning in to our Modern Sales Pros live digital salon on Consistent Repeatable Pipeline, sponsored by our friends at Mixmax. My name is Gina Hawley. I'm the Community Marketing and Events Manager at Modern Sales Pros, and I'm here to introduce today's awesome content and speakers. But before we get into it, I'm going to just give you a brief overview of what the Modern Sales Pros community is and how you can join. So Modern Sales Pros, or MSP, is the world's largest peer learning community that's exclusively for leaders in sales operations, sales management, sales enablement, sales engineering, and related disciplines. The companies on the next slide here represent just a small portion of the larger, robust community that is MSP. We have about 10,000 members in our community, and we engage through awesome digital events, just like the one you're about to experience, through a healthy online forum, as well as our fantastic in-person events that we currently host in 16 cities around the country, where we take the same style of content as today's webinar and let you guys be the experts at carefully crafted tables for awesome peer learning discussion with other top-notch sales leaders. So check out modernsaleshq.com to sign up for an in-person event because we'd love to see you. All right, but enough about MSP. Let's jump into today's content. First of all, this digital salon wouldn't be possible without our sponsor, Mixmax. So Don, would you like to say a few words about Mixmax and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So let's see, Mixmax. In the age of mass emailers and dialers, I think we have sacrificed customer experience for sheer activity. The trend has increased the amount of outbound dials and emails that we reach out to our customers, and those customers are sharing a super awesome experience on social with their colleagues. So to me, best in breed companies are augmenting sales rep workflows, not just automating them. For your reps to create real engagement, they need access, I believe, into deeper insights to your customer, a clear view as to what messaging is working in the field, what's not working in the field, and the ability to easily reach their audience on multiple mediums. So all of this while the heavy lifting and the data entry on the back end is handled by technology so that your reps can stay focused on, selling. So this is where Mixmax comes in. And to keep it at a 10,000 foot level, because I can go on for hours with this, we turn your customer-facing teams into revenue-generating teams. And so if you're interested in learning more, come check us out, mixmax.com. And thank you so much for attending.
Great. So now before we get into it, just a couple things on housekeeping for our audience. Please do use the Q&A panel for questions. We'll field questions both as they come in, and also we have some time allocated at the end. So now let's just have our speakers introduce themselves. So Don, do you want to introduce yourself? And then we'll go through the list.
Sure. So Don Erwin, I am the head of revenue here at Mixmax Corporation.
All right. Next we have Amy Volas.
Amy Volas, the founder and CEO of Avenue Talent Partners.
David Dulany.
Hey everybody. I'm the founder and CEO of Tenbound here in San Francisco.
All right, and lastly, this salon will be moderated by none other than Richard Scrow. Rich, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you for that amazing introduction, Gina. And from everybody at Modern Sales Pros, thank you so much, panelists, for taking some time out of your days to share with us. My name is Richard Scrow. I am the general manager of Modern Sales Pros. And prior to my time here, I was a longtime VP of Sales and VP of Solutions Engineering. So really excited to dive into this topic. So today, as Gina mentioned, for any folks out there in digital land, please do use the Q&A panel for any questions that you have. Do keep those coming. This is a very active crew. We're going to talk a lot, but do feel free to ask questions, ask for clarifications. We can go as broad or as deep as you need to. As we jump into this, our first question here is really a table setter. And we'll start with you, Don, because I think you mentioned something in the introduction that really resonated here. But our first question is really, what are the trends and topics that we're seeing in Repeatable Pipeline? And then on top of that, what are some of the things that companies are doing really well and what they're doing to be successful? And I think I like that automate and augment part. So Don, why don't you take us away?
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. Instead of just automating, I still am a firm believer that at the end of the day, I mean, with technology like Mixmax, I mean, you can obviously send thousands and thousands of emails by clicking a button and automating a lot of your process. But, to me, people still buy from people they like. People still buy from people they trust. And so although technology can help you do things at scale, you still have to have clear, deep insights as to who you're targeting, who you're reaching out to by persona, by individual. And once you finally use technology to potentially at least set up that initial meeting, have the keen insights and get on the phone and talk with somebody live, or if they're in your same town, go across town, and there's nothing beats a face-to-face meeting. And so getting in front of folks with some knowledge and information that you've gained on your prospect or your customer will help you out tremendously. And I think what companies are doing really well and successfully, what we did here, my very first hire when I joined Mixmax was a sales ops person. So I am a firm believer on KPIs. And if you're talking about repeatable pipeline, if you truly and completely understand your KPIs, and they do change constantly. So we run a weekly Rev Ops meeting here at Mixmax to stay on top of what's working, what's not, what the trends are. If you're not inspecting what you expect from your pipeline, from your reps, from your teams, I don't know, good luck with that. And so a healthy combination between your sales and marketing teams, revenue ops, sales ops, constantly inspecting what you're expecting is what I'm seeing a lot of successful companies doing today.
That's awesome. I think that's a really great point. And I think, Amy, especially from your background in the enterprise, it really starts with some of the people that Don mentioned. So I'm sure you have some perspective on that.
And so, just to parlay off of what you were talking about, Don, so you were hired first, right? And then you start thinking about how to build up from there. And so I really think it starts with, I think about it as a house, and you can't build a house for the long haul if the foundation isn't set. So we're talking about foundational stuff. So I'm a big believer that it starts from the top down. And when you hire a leader that is aligned with where the company is and their stage and the goals, and being able to understand what they're stepping into, maybe there's a team, maybe there isn't a team, depends on where they are and all of that. But understanding what's happening in the business, what your buyers need, why they need it, what they're responding to, what your marketplace is responding to, what your goals are, all of that kind of goes into the blender, as I like to say. And then it's about pressing pulse and having your recipe for success. So when it starts from the top down, you can then easily build revenue operations, other things. You can look at the pipeline where it is today, opportunities to strengthen it, opportunities where you're weak, all of those things to dig into and understand before you prescribe anything, I think is really important.
I think that people, it's such a critical part of it, and it's often overlooked. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in the technology piece. But David, from your perspective, both as a founder and somebody who's a sales development expert, what are some of the things you see sort of the best companies doing from a rhythm of the business standpoint, especially with regards to pipeline?
Yeah, I think something to think about is how much time you're spending working in the business versus working on the business. And if you think about you're in the business, you're in the process every day. Sometimes it's hard to take a more of a 10,000 foot view of the process and just start with something as basic as a process map. And whether it's an inbound lead process or an outbound development process, when's the last time you kind of took a step back, mapped it all out, and looked for where are those gaps in the repeatable pipeline? And what we see a lot is, we're all very short-term focused, and we have to be because we have to deliver on a daily basis. But especially, to Amy and Don's point, if you have support from leadership and they can give you a little bit of time to be able to map out the process and attack the gaps, it's something that, as a consultancy, we can do because we come in and we can add that viewpoint, but it's also something that you can do internally. If you can just take a step back, look at the whole process and try to do a gap analysis. That's something great companies are constantly doing, and companies that are struggling, they just don't have time, or they just don't have the bandwidth to be able to take a larger view like that.
Yeah, and Don, how frequently, you mentioned that sort of first hire is ops, and then marketing ops and sales ops. You mentioned a weekly alignment meeting. Are you hitting on some of the topics that David's talking about with this?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that we consistently are talking about iterating and changing when need, seeing what the data is telling us, try to always make sure that you're staying in front of what your trends are telling you. Especially if we're talking repeatable pipeline. If you're not getting, depending on how your marketing and your sales is set up, we have a very specific percentage formula set up for each month as to what percentage are we expecting from inbound leads, are we expecting from outbound cadences, and so on and so forth. And on a weekly basis, we're able to stay on top of the data to be able to make decisions on the fly versus letting an entire month, or you're 3/4 of the way through a quarter and then realizing that you don't have enough to hit your targets. So I think a weekly cadence, talking to David's points, and continue to iterate and make adjustments on the fly is crucial.
And to that point, so David, you got my wheels turning a bit, where you're talking about a process map. And one of the things that I think is really important to think about as you're constructing that is to bring in your other colleagues, right? Because when I think about revenue as a bucket, and I'm excited about this trend of thinking about it holistically versus just sales, marketing has a play in that. Revenue ops has a play in that. Sales operations, which isn't always part of revenue operations, your finance team, your executive team, your sales leadership. I think about it as an ecosystem versus like one thing that you do. It should all be cohesive, and to think about it that way.
Yeah, I think one of the things we used to talk about, especially in my past life, was really like a closed won deal is like such a lagging indicator of this pipeline process and of the operational efficiency. Anything else to add here, amazing panelists, before we move on to our next questions?
Richard, I just wanted to say real quick, we think about, there's a concept of vanity metrics, and if you're not familiar with that, it's things that people are producing, and they might even be reporting on, that don't necessarily move the needle on predictable revenue. And so what's great about taking a higher view and being able to look over the whole process is vanity metrics start to really stick out. And you can have frank conversations with everyone on the revenue team to say, like, does that vanity metric really contribute to the end goal that we're trying to focus on here? Or maybe we should put in some different metrics to talk about during the meeting, because that actually is not really helping. For example, like Matt Hines, who's a great marketing consultant, he used to say, hey, you can't buy a beer with an MQL, and so are we really talking about something that's going to help us to produce predictable, repeatable pipeline, or what here? So it helps to bring that out.
Well, and David, to that, before we go to the next topic, I would add that we're in this world where we're able to share with each other a whole lot. This is a perfect example of what we're all doing. And I look at it through the lens of, these are just bits and pieces of what other people are doing, but it's really about what my business is doing. And I find that a big left turn that people take when they should be going straight ahead is, I read about it online, or somebody was talking about it, or I'm part of this group. And it's what you do if you're a SaaS company. I cannot stand that when that happens. It's like, stop being like everybody else. Stop trying to chase the next unicorn, and think about your business with what your business is doing and who you're doing it with and what you want to be doing for the stage that you're at. All businesses, they're not created equal, right? So it's really important to think about that as well.
Yeah, and Amy, to add to that, I previously, before joining the Series A world, I worked at LinkedIn for a long time. I believe that their sales processes are phenomenal. And my first management gig that I went to that was a Series A company, I thought, well, you know, LinkedIn did it right. So I went in and I implemented basically their sales processes into this small little boutique Series A company. And to say that I failed miserably would be an understatement, but it's some of the things that you learn along the way. So your point is amazingly spot on. It's not a one size fits all. You got to truly understand your business and your customer and all of those things together to make it work.
And I think,
sorry.
So go ahead, Amy.
No, I was just going to say, this comes up a lot in my conversations of when I'm getting to know potential customers and I'm asking them, what are you thinking about in terms of who this hire might be? And especially if it's an early stage startup and they're like, well, and not to pick on LinkedIn because I think very highly of them. But it's like, I want somebody from LinkedIn because they have a playbook. And it's like, but wait a second, those folks at LinkedIn and how long LinkedIn has been refining and tweaking and understanding and the way that it's set there, they are so far ahead of where you are today that those two things may not be created equal. And Don, I'm going to use you as an example in my conversations because quite honestly, it didn't go so well from what you just said. And it's not because you weren't good or the playbook wasn't good. It was trying to force feed it into a place that wasn't ready for it, not set up for it. And you couldn't execute on those things because the dynamics were different.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think this is a good follow on. And Amy, we'll start off with you on this one. Like, what's the role that technology plays in helping out here? And like, how do you get that Goldilocks, like the just right amount? And I think there's a lot of parallels here, right?
There are a lot of parallels. And I think, you know, when it comes to tech, I love technology. There is more available technology now more than ever before. Like I looked at some heat map of all the sales technology and marketing technology that exists today. God only knows what else it looks like of what's being hatched or what's been hatched or what's about to be hatched. But it can be really overwhelming. And what I find is somebody gave me this analogy early on in my career and I use it in so many different ways. Think about like kids at Christmas. They give you the laundry list of like, these are all the things that I want at Christmas. And as a good parent, you're like, of course I'm going to get you all those things. And then the frenzy of opening up all the gifts is done. And you see your kids playing with like one toy, right? And so when I think about technology, it's very much the same way where you give all the folks on your team everything that you think that they need to be the best version of themselves. And it is a very fine line to use that Goldilocks analogy of, too much is too much. It's about enabling your team versus disabling your team. And when you're spending time on Slack and on this tool and that tool and over here and doing this, are you really doing what you need to do to move that needle? And it's interesting because when we talked about this, when we were all coming together to have this conversation, an example just came so far to the top of my mind. And I think it's important to talk about here. I have a client and we're on a confidential search for an executive leader on their sales team. And the very first thing that this individual did is he said, I need tools. And I'm not going to name the tools, but they're very expensive tools that at their stage, there's no way that they even needed those tools. And they spent over 6 figures on all of these tools. None of them are being used. There's no way to quantify or qualify the ROI of those tools. And now this VP of sales is proving out the odds of the average tenure of a sales leader is 19 months and shrinking. That's according to Gong's data, not my data, but Gong's data. And I see that very much through my own lens. So when I think about the role that technology plays, whether you're a departing sales leader or you're just entering in, it's about taking a look at the overall health of the business, what the team's doing, what they're not doing, what the buyer needs, all of that, and using technology to help you. Certain things can be automated, but it will never replace, especially in enterprise sales, that true human connection of solving problems.
And
I'm going to drop the mic. I'm kidding.
This is phenomenal.
I have
First drop mic.
And I think Don, I mean, you hit on this a little bit even at the outset, right? It's this difference between automate and augment.
Yeah. You know, and to touch on Amy's point on the Christmas analogy, I mean, technology is amazingly important, and it can definitely help you stay on top of your metrics. But there is no one piece of software or technology out there that will tell you what it is, that one gift that your child will be playing with only after getting 40 gifts. If there was, then we may not be sitting here talking about all this wonderful stuff here. So it's a combination of all different tools. And I think when you're talking about repeatable pipeline, technology can kind of help you, like I mentioned, inspect what you expect. We use one specific tool. I don't know how chic it is to mention the name of the software tool, but I'll say it's Pete Kazenji's company. We use that tool. When you're talking about repeatable pipeline, for me in sales, I have a team of 8 AEs, and it's different for every single AEs. And where one individual fails in creating repeatable pipeline is going to be completely different from another rep and from another rep. But having insights into what is working for this rep and making that repeatable for the rest of the team, or seeing that this person's not creating pipeline, maybe they're not following up on a second meeting. They don't have a very defined next step. They don't have as much pipeline as everybody else. They're behind on their different key metrics. If you understand, again, I'm touching back on KPIs and metrics, if you understand what they are, and you can manage each individual to be able to hit those specific metrics, and you can stay on top of them in weekly one-on-ones and RevOp meetings and so on. You're inspecting what you expect from every single individual. Technology helps you put all of that into a nice, palatable type of a medium that you can share and make it understandable, and be very prescriptive on, look, these are the areas that I need you focusing on. Generally, with most reps that I've seen, it's one or two things that if you can just tweak this a little bit, it makes the world of difference between that individual's repeatable pipeline. And so I think sometimes managers that I've seen, that I've managed in my time, they look at pipeline as a whole, and then at the end of the day, in my reference of 8 sales reps, 80% of our revenue is coming from 2 people. That's not a sustainable business. And so it's getting that 80-90% of your revenue from each individual, and I think you've got something going there. So,
yeah, and I think, David, from something that you hit on before, right, that 10,000-foot view, having the right people looking at your technology. But I imagine you see and get exposed to a lot of different things. Like, what role are you seeing, and how can folks make the most of their tech investments?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say that your technology is going to magnify whatever process you have. So if you've got a kind of a crappy process, or you haven't really thought about your process enough, and you don't have it mapped out, and you don't have a pretty good handle on where the gaps are, then plugging in tools is probably going to just either confuse or magnify whatever confusion you already have. So I would go back to getting that process down, at least getting a V1, and making sure that you're really strategic in plugging in the solutions that you need, based on where those gaps are. The other thing that I see missing a lot out there is, sort of one owner that has a list of where all the tools are, where the start dates are, who owns the contracts, who signed them, when the contracts are coming up, and at least in each of the functions, there's one person who knows where all these things are, and they have it mapped to the process. And we just tell people, hey, just put a recurring calendar invite for yourself every 90 days to go in, validate the process, and make sure that it still is working. And then also, where are you at with all the different tools? Are you getting enough ROI out of each one? And are you able to justify that? If your CFO comes in and wants to know what all the stuff is, are you able to justify that immediately? You can get ahead of it instead of getting caught, with your pants down, and have that sorted out. The other thing that we see is there's a lot of turnover in the ranks of the operations team. So just make sure that you've got a fail safe if suddenly the person who's in charge of all the tools leaves one day and goes on to a different opportunity, that you can step in immediately. You have a contingency plan there. That's another thing we see, where nobody knows, hey, who bought this and what's the password and things like that. It's crazy.
It's something where there was a sales salon that we did an in-person event like this where somebody was like, I strip down tools all the way. If I don't see the utilization numbers, I shut it off. And if the sales reps whine, I say, hey, where's the ROI for it? So it was a very militant ops person, but it is one perspective to take from a cross-control standpoint. Amy, this is a question. I think this is a good question for everybody. Great question from Jeff Mitchell. But Amy, let's start with you on this. So thinking about bringing all the other departments on board and making sure that we've got kind of agreement across the different stakeholders. How do you suggest the best way to get those other departments on board with any investment in new technology? And then I'm sure Don and David, you have points on this as well, but let's start with Amy.
Yeah, so, it goes back to that ecosystem kind of culture of accountability thought process that I have. And instead of just making a decision in a vacuum and being like, well, now I have this tool, so what are we going to do with it? Oh, in sales ops, I need your buy-in, and marketing, I need you to do, to drop everything of what you're working on, and I need you to write templates for me, or whatever the case may be. I think it should be collaborative of, hey, here's what we have today, and this is in executive leadership meetings, or form a committee of whatever cadence works well of coming together. But I think it's about each person that has a stake in the game of where you might need help later, whether it's from marketing or it's from sales ops or it's from somebody else that's going to be involved somewhere along the line in the evolution of using said tool. I think they need to be involved as you're making a decision. They're also going to help you think through it holistically of what are my blind spots? I'm looking at it through the sales lens, but marketing might actually have some things that they think about, or maybe hip to new tools, or maybe they talk to this person independently. So it's about corralling everybody that has a stake in the game to having these conversations, to having them be involved in the search and selection and decision process, so that there aren't any hidden surprises and everybody understands and knows what's expected of said tool and what your stake in the game is.
And I think this goes back to something Don said at the beginning of really having firm alignment across an understanding of the process. But Don, this is an interesting question. How do you make sure that happens at Mixmax?
So we sat down first, and the first thing we did was we aligned on what is our end goal. I mean, where are we trying to get to first? And just truly everybody, putting in their 2 cents as to what our end goal, not just for this year, but setting us up for next year and possibly even looking 5 years down the road. What is our exit goal, so on and so forth. But everybody getting on the same page initially with what the goal is. Then you can start to have and introduce key stakeholders to take certain pieces of the puzzle and take ownership of those pieces of the puzzle that help all of us together get to the common end goal. For me, I think, to touch on what Amy says, it's not a vacuum. It's not, well, we're talking about revenue here, so the revenue person is going to make the decisions on the tools that we use, because the tools that marketing need to help us get to the end goal, they're more familiar with those tools than I am familiar. So who am I to say, no, you can't use that, you should. So I think it starts with coming up with what the end goal is, per quarter, per month, per year. And then building around. And I think once everybody feels like they have their own individual stake in how they can help the team as a whole, one team, one dream, get to the aligned goal, everything else becomes much easier.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that sounds so obvious, but start with the end in mind. It's weird how that
Be amazed how many companies don't have this conversation.
Yeah, well, I think it comes back to a little bit of what we all said in the beginning. It's a people component of it. It's making sure you've got the right people in the place. There's good dialogue amongst everybody, and there's a clear understanding and trust of, hey, we're all in this together. This is the mountain we're headed up.
Right.
Well, and by raise of hands, how many people do you know that are like, oh, I bought this tool on my corporate card and now I've got to figure it out, and people are pissed, right? Like, I know I've seen that. I'm sure others have seen that. And then you've got a disaster, and thinking about cross-functional alignment, that's a real great way to have that us versus them mentality of like sales versus everybody else, and you're just renegades and you're a pain in the neck and you just go do revenue. It's like, you've got to build those bridges instead of making it easy to, tear them down.
Yeah, and I think it's something too that kind of comes into this, and this is a little bit more of a free form question as we found in the prep, but I think it's interesting to think about as the revenue model evolves for organizations that are really knocking it out of the park, or just ones that we're seeing. What does that breakdown look like between, and it can be from a tooling perspective, it can be from a people perspective, it can be from a revenue perspective, between the new business, new logos, and then the stuff that's coming in from the existing business. And Don, let's start with you actually on this. I know you've had some interesting points.
Yeah, and to me, when I think about this, the breakdown between new and existing, it depends on where you are in your business. It depends on where you are in your organization. If you're a seed round, obviously the majority of it's going to really heavily rely on net new business as you're just starting to grow your business. We're still a Series A company, so we're still relying quite heavily. Our direct sales team now is the fastest growing revenue producing team for Mixmax, albeit the company was around for 4 years doing self-serve, no direct sales team involved. So there's now a quite healthy mix between 50-50 here between net new revenue as we're trying to move up market as a mature organization. But the ARR model breaks significantly if that first R isn't happening. So if you're not recurring your business and thinking about existing customers and how to expand existing customers, that's going to be a tough road for you there. So I don't know if I'm necessarily answering the question, but it really depends on where you are in your cycle of a company, Series A, Series B, C. The further along you get, I think that shifts a little bit more to 50-50 between new and existing. And the earlier that you are, it's a lot more heavily focused towards net new business and logo acquisition to start to grow your business.
To jump in on that, so I think that's certainly a good measuring stick, but I also think especially for the earlier stage companies, and especially if you're going after the enterprise, and you're thinking about going after funding too, right? So I'm adding the layers of complexity here. But I find so many companies get caught up on all the new logos. We've got to have all these new logos in our pitch deck. And that's all well and good. But what companies that stick around for the long haul, and we all know what the stats are of startups and how many fail versus how many succeed. When I think about the ones that truly succeed versus fail, they look at it back to the original topic of, it's an overall revenue umbrella, and it's about the customer. And the last time I checked, the customer holds the keys to the castle. They trump all. And so we spend all this time focusing on net new, hunting, forget about farming. And then you spend all this time and you have these customers and you don't think about them, right? Or what they need or what's going to keep you. And it's a lot easier to take care of what you've worked so hard to get than to get something new in the first place. And it's a really short-sighted approach to overall growth for the long haul of not paying attention to what you now have, and that post-sale or land and expand, or there's so many different things that you can do after the customer to keep them and to grow them for the long haul.
Yeah, and David, I know from the sales development, I mean, you've seen some pretty interesting trends on that exact point. Like, how can you more effectively expand your business from your existing customer base?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's a really good point. I mean, we usually start by thinking, let's flip this around. Let's not necessarily talk about us and ourselves and what we do as a company, but let's go through the customer journey and the process that they go from finding out about pain point that they have internally, and then what they usually will do in order to research the pain point, and then the process that they have to go through to look for solutions, and then map our process to that. Because, at the end of the day, the people out there, they don't really care about what, if you're in sales or you're in marketing or even what your company is. They're really just trying to figure out their own business problem and how they can solve that. And hopefully we can enter into that conversation with a solution that's superior, because that's what we know about. So when you think about how to set up the process, let's flip it around. Like, forget about our company and what we do and all the silos and everything that exists. Let's think about how do we map that to the customer journey, and then find out what gaps we have in our process, and then plug in, you know, technology and training and things like that to get to that point. And so, you know, perfect example, what leading companies are so obsessed with their customers and the pain points that they solve that they're really thinking about, you know, how can we best serve them? And so there's, you know, whether they're an early stage company really trying to get in front of newer customers and try to help them, then they really focus on that. If they're a later stage company, then it's more mixed. And even on the sales development side, we see some leading companies that are pointing sales development resource toward their install base and trying to understand, you know, we've got a you know, the land and expand model. We've landed at one part of this company, but we know that we can solve the pain points for other departments, and we've got sales development resources. So let's push those over to try to solve the pain points for other departments. And so they've got a strategy and a process to support that as well. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you don't have to get stuck in the mind frame of this is exactly how everyone's doing it. Don mentioned it before, you know, bringing your same playbook and trying to recreate that. You really have to get into your situation, understand how the customer journey operates, and then put your process to support that, because that's how you're really going to grow.
One trend I'm seeing on that point, David, that in the last couple of MSP events that I attended here in San Francisco, some of the topics are, I'm seeing a lot more companies now today, more than ever before, hire specific sales development people for the farming side of their business, for the account management, yes, for the CSM side of the business. And so there's a lot of products, Mixmax is one of them, where we can sell into multiple different departments within an organization. And typically you get your entry point into one of those departments. And if you're not effectively going in and trying to win those other pieces of the business, that's going to, again, be tough for you. So I'm starting to have a lot of conversations and seeing a lot more companies start to develop SDR teams into their account management side of the business, which I think is brilliant.
There's something too, a couple of things on this that I've seen even in the community. I think the stat is it's between 5 to 7 times more expensive to get a new enterprise logo than it is for you to retain one, which is a really, really wild stat to think about. The other one is, especially once a company gets a little bit of cash, you see almost overinvestment in customer success and a little bit of underinvestment in the new business, just to make those customers so wildly successful that they become almost like extensions of your marketing team. So like doubling or tripling down your resources on that at the right cash point. And there was a question that came in here, and I don't, and I'll throw it out to the team here. I think this is another one of those that it really depends, but are there, or have you seen sort of best practices around, you know, renewal ARR or new logo, what the split is by different revenue sort of levels at a company? And Amy, I'll throw it to you first, and then we can go to Don and David on that. But I feel like it depends, right?
I think it's a big depends, and I think you have to look at your own unit economics, right? And so not all sales teams or numbers like that are created equal. And so when I think about what you're talking about for expansion, for example, and if I were to look at those numbers, how I would set my expectations if I'm going after it from an SDR perspective versus true enterprise perspective, which Richard, you just described, is a lot more costly. But it's what is required at a certain stage for a certain kind of customer. That's a whole other ball of wax. And so I don't know enough about what that question is or what those numbers are. And I think that's the thing. Like when we talk out loud like this, I know people want to understand and know, well, what do I need to think about? At what stage does this cut off? Tell me how to do it, or tell me what you're doing. And I'm always really careful with that, because I think when you're talking out loud, there's also a responsibility to disclaim it of, and I think all three of us have made this point more than once in this discussion, it depends, because it depends on your business, on your buyer, on the marketplace, on the segment that you're going after, on how your internal structure is set up. And so I feel like I'd be really, really irresponsible if I started diagnosing what that should look like.
Yeah. I think about it, if I'm in the $1 to $10 million space, when do you double down on your CS or your account management teams? Again, I think it goes back to if you're running an ARR business model and you don't have a recurring piece to it. If you're one of those companies that's really just focused on net new logo acquisition, although in the early stage that's important because that's what help build your business. But if you're not at least initially 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 hunter AE hires to at least one CSM, if you're going to be that company that is not going to reach out to your newly closed customer until 1 or 2 months before the renewal comes, hey buddy, renewal's coming up, that's going to be an interesting conversation. And so, getting your customers, your new customers, I think regardless of what stage of business you're at, to success with your solution as quickly as possible is important. But yeah, it really depends. In your early stage company, 1 to 10 million, and you're hiring 1-to-1 hunters and farmers and this and that, your CAC becomes amazingly ridiculous. But I think if you're putting all of the right things in place, talk to your board about what your CAC should be. They're probably okay spending $1 to get $1 if that's what it takes to build your business. But retention and, I think that the key for early stage startups is you're going to have logo retention for sure. But if you have at least net positive retention from a revenue perspective and you're expanding and growing your business, then some logo retention is okay. As long as, you're ending the year slightly above on a revenue perspective with what last year's revenue brought in.
Certainly, it's definitely a multifaceted problem, and thanks panel for your perspectives on this. So another question from Jeff Mitchell, and I'm going to kick this over to David to get started. What have you seen in terms of the SDR team? Where does that reside? Is it sales? Is it marketing? Is it somewhere else?
Yeah, I think the latest data from the Bridge Group has about 65, 70%, and somewhere in that range report to sales. And so that's definitely a continuing trend. I think, and sorry to keep coming back to the consulting answer, but it really does depend a lot on if it's a high velocity sale, if it's like a mid-market sale, if it's an enterprise sale, where they necessarily sit. It's a classic argument. Sales is in the business of receiving appointments from the SDR program, and so they are looking at things from a receiving point of view, and they just want a steady level of volume and quality coming from the SDR department. And they're, in just, anecdotally in my experience, they're not necessarily as concerned with how that happens. And so in some cases, it depends on the leader of the sales team, but in some cases, if you're just waiting and receiving, you're not as interested in how to improve the program and make it better. It's just a question of trying to, figure out why they're not performing. And so it can sometimes create like a negative atmosphere. But if the sales leader is supportive and wants to go up funnel and really try to figure out how to support the program from a how perspective, then it can be super successful. And especially the mentorship that's available for the SDRs, on the with the AE relationship. If only 30 to 40% of the programs are reporting to marketing, that tells me that right now most programs are reporting to sales. On the marketing side, obviously, the more integrated that the team is with the campaigns that are happening, there's a better chance for success. There's more of a messaging continuity, but I think out there it's seen more as a sales role, and so the majority of the programs are still reporting to sales.
Don, how are you set up at Mixmax?
Yeah, my CMO and I argue about this all the time. She is trying to. I see the point, but maybe I'm a little old school in the sense of. To me, there's a conflict of interest here. If my marketing team is measured on MQL to SQLs, I have a feeling that all of a sudden they start reporting to marketing, that percentage is going to just grow. And so I think that for sales to continue ownership of this, we want to work on, I measure the sales team, once it becomes an SQL to SQO qualified opportunity, and then SQO to close. And so they're not going to accept something into their pipeline that they don't feel is fully qualified. So for me, the sales team and the sales rep gets on the hook for the pipeline once they accept that lead given into them. And so again, it's a fun argument that we're having internally here, that I don't want all of a sudden a bunch of SQLs being put on my team and entering my pipeline, and then my win-loss ratio goes way down because it really wasn't qualified, shouldn't have hit my books anyway, shouldn't have. I want marketing absolutely to be involved. I want them to understand why we accept an opportunity, why we don't accept an opportunity, and focus on how they can use that data to and what channels those leads are coming from, to double down on the ones that are working, go away from the ones that aren't working, and be involved in that way. But I'm of the 70% belief that this is a sales function, and I'm going to hold at that.
I've seen some.
Go ahead. Sorry, Amy. Yeah.
No, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, at the end of the day, it's qualified appointments, belly to belly with a qualified prospect that leads to qualified pipeline that leads to high quality revenue. And so really it's like whatever it takes to get the high quality appointment, which leads to high quality pipeline, which leads to high quality revenue. And, whatever organizational structure will support that is great. I mean, because that's what everybody's on the same page around. And, the whole, it's kind of like, if you're from the old days, tastes great, less filling. I'm really dating myself, but you can Google it. There used to be this advertisement on for Miller Lite where people would just say tastes great, less filling. It just went on for decades, and that's kind of how I feel with the whole where should SDRs roll up to. So sorry, Amy, I cut you off though.
That's okay. I'm taking you back to the Bud Light frogs. So
there you go.
What we're talking about. So just to play devil's advocate here, because I see all sides of the equation from my vantage point, and sales is my first business love. So Don, I totally get it. But I'm seeing some really remarkable companies that are doing really great work. Their numbers are impressive. They're scaling, like all the things that everybody aspires to be. And what they've done is they have force-fed marketing and sales to truly be aligned, where the leader for the SDR team has a dotted line to both the revenue, both the sales leader and both the marketing leader. So by way of that, they have to think about both sides.
I think with this one, and this came up in our prep session for this, and it's good for the audience to hear as well. Don't be dogmatic. I know we've said it depends a bunch of times here, but sometimes, I think David, you mentioned this when we were prepping. There's this notion of, well, I need a brand name company, as you were mentioning earlier. I brought my LinkedIn sales process. I need a gal from Salesforce, whatever it is. Don't be dogmatic about things and believe that a CRO should look like this and an SDR leader should look like that. Look at your business, and I think we've all made, the panelists have all made great points today. Look at your business. Think about how your customer and your prospect interacts with your business. Think about how they inspect that, and then set your business up appropriately. Easier said than done, totally, but something that I think we've come back to a few times here as a theme. One last question in from the audience here, and this is a unique one. So this was back to kind of that revenue split. What strategies have you seen from folks that maybe sell a product that's a single seat, single license, but it's being used by multiple folks at the company? Certainly, I've never been guilty of sharing a Bloomberg license in the past, or Zoom Info or others, but I imagine there's some people who do. So in those situations, what does the customer success motion look like to make sure that you get paid for those? What have you seen be successful? And I'll throw this out, sort of a toss up here.
A cease and desist letter? I don't know. No.
I mean, back in my Microsoft days when we were selling on-prem software, we used to audit people. But that's now I'm dating myself.
Don, what are your thoughts from LinkedIn? Because, people want to share those seats, and LinkedIn is quite fierce about putting you in jail if you even try to do that. Yeah. So I'm curious about what your thoughts are from your experience of knowing that a company really enforces that and they're hardcore with that.
I think companies should enforce it. And if not, then maybe come up with some type of what's the term I'm looking for here? So come up with some type of a shared seat license type of I can't think of the term right now, but we ended up having a compliance team specifically at LinkedIn that did nothing but that. And it's very easy to understand by IP address if you are sharing licenses or not. And so having a compliance team to be able to go in and say, we notice this is happening, and if this continues to happen, then they get an invoice for it. And so a site license is what I was thinking about. And so if you have a product where it is multiply shared and you have a one seat, one sort kind of thing, but you know that your product's being shared, perhaps you can come up with some type of a site license model where you can allow up to X number of users be able to log in at any given time, if that's how the software is set up. And so it's a matter of just taking a look at your business model and the back end of your software, if that's an easy fix that can be set up. But that may be something where you can have different pricing points to allow, it's a one seat, but it can be shared by up to, and as long as there's measuring in place and a compliance team in place that can help measure that. And unless you're tracking it on the back end, that's a difficult one. But we may or may not have all done it once or twice in our lifetimes. But I think it should be paid for.
Yeah, and I was just gonna, it gives you an opportunity to some extent. I think the way that Netflix handles this is really good because they know that you're giving out the thing, and they give you up to 5, I think, that can be logged in at the same time. And if they just shut it down immediately and they wouldn't let you share it, then you might get a little, I'm not so crazy about this, but the fact that that you can kind of hand out 5 makes you a little more locked in, I think, with Netflix. And then I like what Don mentioned of knowing the way that your customer is using the product and giving them some guardrails. And then it's like, it gets to a certain point where it's like, hey, come on, you got to pay more now.
Yeah.
Or what if you reverse engineer it and it's part of, I'm a big believer that you stay often for action. If we go beginning of the customer journey of, we know it's really tempting to share our product. It happens. Let me describe what that looks like when that does happen. Then you are already setting that stage for, you're aware of what goes on. This is going to be a mutual discussion. If you find that you need more product, here are the signals that we look for. What are you anticipating? So it's much more of a collaborative discussion versus like a slap on the wrist. Because I will say for some of the technology that's out there that is so overpriced, even for enterprise clients, it's overpriced. For companies that can really utilize that technology, they look at it as like a necessary evil. And when I think about technology and trying to do good business for the long haul, and maybe I'm being Pollyanna, the last thing that I want to do is piss off my customers and have them refer to me on every G2 crowd social thing, all of that about being the necessary evil. And I want to go back to, we're living out loud, right? We're in this modern digital age. You've got G2 crowd, you've got Owler, you've got Capterra, you've got Glassdoor, you've got all of these things. And if you're going to piss me off, I'm going to go there and I'm going to look at every other thing that I can do as I'm making my buying decision, just me personally. So it's a delicate balance. And that's why I'm a big believer of going back to the foundation of have a conversation, talk about the white elephant in the room and that could be a potential risk. And here's how you handle it. And what might they think?
That's awesome. Great points, everybody. And thank you all so much for spending some of your afternoon sharing all this amazing knowledge with the MSP community. For our attendees, thank you so much for joining us. Again, Don and the team at Mixmax, this wouldn't have been possible without you. So really appreciate you helping us put this event on, pull these panelists together. And for folks that are interested, we have a number of great in-person events coming up with the Modern Sales team. For everybody that attended and registered, you'll be invited to join the community shortly after this, as will the recording be sent out and the slides as well. So you have access to all of that. Don, Amy, and David, one last time from the team at MSP, thank you so much. I learned a ton here, and I really look forward to watching the recording again. Tons of great nuggets in here. Thank you all so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon, evening, or morning.